Welcome everybody to React Wednesdays. My name is TJ Van Tol. I work as a developer advocate at Progress. With me as always, Dan Wilson. Dan, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm Dan Wilson. I work at Digital Primates, where we do enterprise React consulting. We also curate the enterprise React newsletter. So if that's your kind of thing, Google it. We'll never sell your email.
Awesome. And if you are new here, this is React Wednesdays. It's a weekly show that we do every week. We bring in cool people from around the React world. We have them tell us or show us something interesting. So today we're about to welcome Tanner Linsley onto the show, but I did want to give a call out to some of our upcoming shows. So we have Brandon Bayer coming in to talk to us about Blitz.js. I believe they actually just went to beta here just the other day, so that'll be interesting to talk to them. And then we have some people from the Microsoft Teams team coming to join us to talk about extensions, which is something I did not know you could do. We use Teams at Progress. I had no idea you could build extensions with React. So apparently it's a thing. So if you're curious how that works, you want to see it in action, join us in a couple weeks and we'll go through that.
You know, I gave this a try the other day, and it just works surprisingly easy. Once you sort of have your React app, you can just bring it into Teams by this packaging step. And what's really nice about it is you can almost have like an application catalog inside of Teams that would connect to your single sign-on, and a lot of the Microsoft 365 APIs is all kind of baked in. There's a really interesting way to put applications where people need them.
Yeah, I kind of want to try it out because I have all sorts of like little ideas of things you can do. Because like you said, having access to all the corporate stuff is a pain if you don't do it inside like a Microsoft playground sort of thing.
Yeah, and one other thing I found interesting about it is, there's always this fear where if you have someone inside of an app and then they're let go, so to speak, how do you find all the places they have access? And with Teams, you can just revoke their ability to use this app, and you can kind of stop it at the administration layer. And so I know that from an enterprise perspective, they'll really appreciate that, because that's an issue people are really sensitive about. How do you protect all your line of business apps when they may be all over the place?
Yep. Very cool. So make sure to check those out. There's some fancy links up here if you want to subscribe, get notifications and such, add it to your calendar. That's something you can do. But for today, I want to welcome our guest to talk about React Query. I want to welcome Tanner Linsley to the screen. Tanner, how you doing? I think you're on mute.
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. You want to start by just telling if somehow someone hasn't heard of you, who you are, what you do, all that good sort of stuff?
Yeah. I'm front-end engineer. I have a startup called Nozzle. It's been around for about 6 years. Nozzle.io. We are basically reverse engineering Google search results into big data and like dashboards and just kind of a big data warehouse. It's pretty cool stuff. Because of that, I've built a lot of open source libraries, been pretty busy with React over the last few years. So,
yeah, and you have, you've got Dr. Replicate in here we've already got some fans of React Query here in the chat. And you even have the Tan stack, which is one of my favorite names of any tech ever. I just realized I could totally create the Van stack as a competing alternative, but I don't think I have the prolificness that you do, because there's quite a bit that's went into this. Actually, maybe you could just start by listing out some of the projects the open source stuff you've worked on, just for people here in chat, because there's quite a few of them.
Yeah, so the ones that are still around, React Query, obviously. React Table is another library that I work pretty hard on. It's basically just some hooks to build extensible tables in React. They're headless hooks too, so it's a pretty interesting approach to building tables. You're building tables without actually giving people the ability to build the markup. You kind of just put that on them. It's great. I have a React charts library, which is kind of just more of an experiment, fun thing right now. In the past, I have built products like React Static was something that was fun for a while. Obviously, it can't compete with the millions of dollars that Next.js and Gatsby are getting. So it was just me against all of this corporate money, I decided to kind of close it out. But I worked on Chart.js for a long time. If you use Chart.js 2.0, that was some of my work. And I don't know, just a handful of other smaller libraries that no one's probably ever heard of. I also have React-Form, which is something you probably shouldn't use. You should probably use Formic or like React Final Form or something like that.
Well, cool. And of course, you have React Query, and I know that's what we want to at least start talking about today. I know you said if other questions come in chat, by the way, if you have any questions for Tanner, we're just hanging out today, so feel free to bring them up and we can take this where we want to go. But maybe you could just start, if people haven't heard of React Query, right? Like I think you've got the elevator pitch down at this point, but you want to give us like the like 1 to 2 minute condensed version of what React Query is, what problem it solves, that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. I'll actually just share my screen here.
Yep, I'll go ahead and bring it up.
Got it?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard of React Query, it's just a library to help you fetch and synchronize data from external sources. Traditionally, people have done that in using something like Redux, or at the most basic or naive level, it's just like using a use effect to call fetch or axios.get or something like that. React Query kind of addresses the need for server state, because not all state is created equal. There's kind of like global state and there's server state. Server state is just entirely different, comes with a lot of unique challenges. Some of those challenges are, doing like auto refetching and, making sure that the data is up to date all the time. You have paginated queries and load more infinite scroll queries, something that people like to do a lot. But there's always just this massive edge case that people don't handle when they build something like their own little use effect hook. React Query just handles all of that, and it handles it really nicely. Like the most basic example I could show you here, just so you kind of get a gist of how it feels, is let's do simple. We'll just open this up.
Yeah, can you blow the font size up at that?
Here we go.
Yeah.
So this is like the most basic use case. You just kind of import use query, give it a special little name, whatever you want. We're just calling it repo data right here. And then you just give it a function that fetches your data, returns a promise. And under the hood, it is doing so much. But at the basic level, it's handling loading states and error states, letting you know when it's fetching in the background. And it's doing automatic fetching in the background too. So if we were to, let's see, look at this basic code sandbox here, if it'll pull up.
Yeah, I know I've come to appreciate it too, because I think everybody, when they first come to React, they first start by just putting in like a simple fetch call, right? Your use effect, you fetch something.
Right.
Which is fine when you just need that, but inevitably you're going to need more in terms of you need to handle errors, you need to handle some UI when things are loading, then you start to get into caching and all this stuff, and it quickly gets out of hand very, very quickly.
And it's the little things that count too, like something that takes people by surprise at first with React Query, but it's one of its best features is like when you refocus the window, you can see it refetching in the background. It's really fast, but that way, things are always staying up to date. If we visit something that if we try and fetch something we've already fetched, it's in the cache. So it just kind of happens instantly instead of seeing those hard loading states. And you can see down there in the cache that these are the dev tools, by the way, which I think are fantastic. You can see that it's actually keeping all the stuff inside of the cache, and you can actually go and inspect everything inside of the cache itself. It's really cool. So that's kind of like the high level. What is React Query? It's just it's a data for synchronizing data It's a library for synchronizing data into your application. So
why don't we, if Chet has any questions about React Query, feel free to chime in and I will pass them along.
sure.
But for now, maybe we could talk about, you even brought it up here, because I know you just released a new version, because what at least I want to kind of chat about is the new stuff, and I want to get into some of the experimental stuff as well.
Yeah, me too.
Because I think we could have a lot more fun with that sort of stuff. But
Mhm.
maybe you could just start with React Query 3, right? Like what changed? What are the new things? What are the new features? What's the short version of what's in here, sort of thing?
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff that just kind of got better overall. Better support for certain things, and infinite queries are now bidirectional. If you don't know what that means, it's okay. So like just kind of improving existing APIs. There are a few things that are new, or at least improved enough that they're worth mentioning. The SSR story is pretty interesting and cool now in React Query. We got a lot of help from some of the contributors, some external contributors that really helped us flesh out the SSR story. So that would be something we could talk about. Other things too, it has selectors now, these query selectors. So if you're familiar with the selector concept, it's being able to kind of like narrow down a larger set of data to a smaller set. You do that a lot with queries coming from the server. You might not be interested in subscribing to the entire piece of data that you're getting from the server, but just a small piece of it. So we have selectors now that are kind of similar to like a Redux selector, if you've ever used those, or like the reselect library. That's really interesting. Let's see. Use queries hook is kind of cool. I could show you what that's all about. But that can handle some weirdness with doing parallel queries, where before you were limited by like the rules of hooks, where you had to render use query, for however many times you wanted to make a query. But if you had like a list of items that was changing and you needed to do a query for each one of those items, you couldn't really do that because you would break the laws of hooks, right? So use queries is a way that we got around that. It's pretty cool. Other interesting things, React queries, actually, the core logic is technically agnostic now. So if you wanted to go and build, a view adapter, which I know people are doing, or a svelte adapter, which I know people are doing, you could do that now. It's pretty cool. Yeah, and then just kind of the experimental stuff we talked about. This is just one of them. There's like this persist query client experimental package, and then like creating persisters. And we have some other experimental things too that I just added, honestly, last week. So let's see, there's a local storage persister. There's a broadcast query client plugin that's pretty cool. I can show you guys what that does. So there's a few things that we can talk about. I don't know what you want to talk about first. Maybe we could just start with like SSR.
Yeah, why don't we had one question come in from the chat, and then I think, why don't we just take those things you discussed almost in sequence? And I think like SSR is at the top of the list, so maybe we can start there.
Yeah.
We did have a question come in from
Linton Aaron.
Does your integration mesh well with Apollo? Because Apollo also has a use query hook.
So that is a great question. And the answer to that is that React Query pretty much replaces Apollo. It doesn't integrate with Apollo. React Query is like Apollo. Think of Apollo as a React query that has been built specifically for consuming a GraphQL API. And React Query is more of like an agnostic Apollo, where you can get an Apollo-like API, but you can fetch any kind of data with it. It could be from a REST API, GraphQL. You could fetch it for however you want, right? I even had somebody using React Query and they were fetching data from SQLite. Like, it's asynchronous and not technically remote, but that's what they're using it for. So it doesn't really integrate with Apollo. In fact, I've had a lot of people who have had a lot of success replacing Apollo with React Query. You get to drop like 100 kilobytes on your bundle because Apollo is huge. And usually they tell me that it's just easier to reason about and simpler in architecture than Apollo.
Well, so speaking of using React Query for anything, that might be a decent segue to SSR, because in my head, I'm having I've never used React Query with on the server side before. And I'm actually having trouble just wrapping my brain around it, because so my head says, right, I say use query that fetches something. Mm-hmm. But if that code's already on the server, then almost messes with my head a little bit, because could it almost just grab the you're on the server, right? Does it just could you just talk to the database directly? Am I
kind of
not thinking of this? I'm curious how this just works in general.
It's not quite like server component style, right? Where you're just oh, let's just grab the data.
Right.
And moving closer along that spectrum, it's not like Remix where there's no client-side fetching. I guess you can do client-side fetching with Remix too. It's closer to a mixture between something like Next, where you're using initial data, you're getting the data on the server to do the initial paint, and then you are hydrating your data back into React Query when it mounts on the front end, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's almost like you're getting, it's almost like a stream of data coming back from the server, or
kind of. I'll walk you through these two steps here. So one of them, this is the most simple. I don't think it's the best way to do it, but it is a way. But it's the simplest way, using initial data. So React Query has this initial data option where if you pass initial data to React Query, then it's just going to take that data and put it into the cache synchronously, and it's going to act like it's already loaded, right?
So if you're rendering this on the server, right, you might already have the data, so you just plop it in there more or less. Okay.
So this is an example of getting some blog posts on Next.js using the get static props hook kind of. So get static props happens when you do a build, a static build. So you hit, next build, and it goes and grabs your posts. You take those posts and you pass them from Next into the post component here. Now, something people don't realize here is that this data going from this get static props function here and moving into props, that's getting serialized across the wire usually, at least into your render function. And if it's static props, then it's nothing really that big of a deal, because it just happens statically. But get server-side props is different. If this were get server-side props, then that posts would be getting serialized and sent down to the client to some extent. So that's how we can do this with React Query and initial data, is whether it's get static props or server-side props, doesn't matter. You just fetch the initial version of whatever the data is going to be, and then pass it down through props, and then stick it onto use query's initial data, and it just works. And you can see down here, okay, there's a few trade-offs to consider. What are those trade-offs? Well, if you call use query, this is just calling use query right at the root of posts. But if you're calling use query in a deeper component, down the tree that you're rendering, it's gonna probably not be very fun to pass that props post all the way down to wherever that use query is, right? You're gonna have to prop drill that initial data all the way down. And then again, if you're using it in multiple locations, you'll have to pass initial data to all of them. Same problem as prop drilling. The other thing too is that there's not really any way to know when the query was fetched on the server. So this data updated at property internally in React Query thinks that it was just barely fetched when it could have been fetched maybe a couple seconds ago, right?
Probably set it to just new date internally, I imagine.
Right. So this is the easy setup. This does work. If you're just doing something really naive and simple, like this works great. So that what this will do is like it'll get your original blog posts, it will render them on the server, like use query data will have the blog posts synchronously. So it will render this component just like it is normal.
Yep.
And then when it gets to the client, it's going to kind of hydrate from this initial data state, and it's going to start doing that refetching, and it's going to keep it up to date.
And so how does is the hydration actually, like, are we talking like WebSockets level hydration, or is it polling the server?
No, and to be technically honest, it's not really hydration with this approach. This is more of just like, here's some initial data, and we turn it from the static view into the dynamic view.
Yep. Okay.
So it just turns from a static, query into like a dynamic one. We start fetching on use effect. So it's just a gradual, it's incremental, I guess, what's the term I'm looking for? It's incremental enhancement, right? You start with static and then it just becomes dynamic. So there's not really any hydration here.
Yep.
Down here, though, is the hydration part, which is a little bit more involved, but it can really make things a lot easier and better. So stay with me here for a minute, because this might get not complex, but if it's the first time you've seen hydration code for React Query, it can look kind of funny. So really what we're doing is inside of our main app. So like this is all from Next.js perspective, because a lot of people use Next. But there's like an app wrapper component that wraps around your entire application. And this is that component. So what we're doing is we are creating a query client that holds all of our data, and we're passing it down to our application. But what we're doing is we are also looking at the page props for any page that we load, whether it's static or dynamic, get server-side props, whatever. We're looking at those page props that we normally send through right here.
Yep.
And we're looking for a special property on them called dehydrated state. It could be whatever you want, but we call it dehydrated state here. And if that exists, like we pass it to this hydrate component that you get from React Query. And this is really cool because this hydration from the perspective of a page. So now we're into a single page, like blog posts. Like here's our blog post page, right?
Yep.
And now instead of having to do that initial data stuff, you can just say, okay, use query posts, get posts. Like there's nothing new here. It's just kind of what you're used to, right? And then this one right here could be another query. You could have as many queries as you want, and they could be as deeply nested in components as you want. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you prefetch and hydrate the query client with that data before it loads. And that happens up here. So for any page, you say, okay, I want my posts to statically render, whether it's static or dynamic, I want them to render on the server. So we're going to create a new query client, and we're going to prefetch the posts key. So you can see this key is the same right there.
Yep.
We're just saying, go get the posts, right? And you can await this on the server. So you're saying, go get the posts and put them into the posts key on our query client. And when it gets done, we return that props object with the dehydrated state. And we basically take the query client and just like package it up. We dehydrate it and we package it up into JSON. And that's what gets spit out right here in our app for every single page when we're navigating, doing anything like that. And so if that dehydrated state is found, it just unwraps it using this hydrate component and sticks it into our query client that we're using on our app. And that means that when this use query posts runs, that data for posts is already going to be in the cache.
I kind of got that. Yeah, exactly.
I know it's a lot. And you know what? You don't necessarily need to understand it all right out of the box, right? The important part is that it just works.
I guess like let me back up here because I think we could probably talk about the syntax for like the next 40 minutes,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, there's even another example here that's like, hey, if you're not using Next, here's how to do it. Like just purely using like raw, like if you were using Express or something like that, it's the same exact thing. So it gets a little more, even more syntaxy, right?
And when I say back up, I imagine like presumably the reason you should care about any of this is you want to make your rendering of something that takes dynamic data faster, right? Like you're really looking to optimize.
You want it to happen on the server either for speed or for easier SEO, right?
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of like context to server-side rendering. Are you server-side rendering public data? Are you server-side rendering like private user data? Like, do they need to be authenticated? There's a lot that goes into this. We even designed the hydration around React Query and the documentation to make sure that you're not sharing requests and query caches between different requests, because you could potentially expose private user data.
Yeah, because it's almost like you're exposing like a data dump.
Yeah, exactly.
You're more or less, at least if I'm understanding this correctly, you're more or less putting it like in context of the page. Here's like a chunk of data that's ready to go that you could do things with, more or less.
Yep. It's
You know,
true.
the old saying goes, there's only two hard problems in computer science. First is naming things, and second is cache invalidation. So
Cache invalidation, it is so hard.
the fact that you've kind of tied all this up into a very easily addressable DSL is pretty impressive, because when I was doing my research here, one of the things that impressed me was how much common code wasn't required using React Query, but would be required if you weren't using it.
Right. Even just on the client, like you can see this caching. There's a basic caching example of like what happens under the hood. And there's a lot to think about. This is the kind of stuff that nobody thinks about when they're writing their use effect hook, right? Like inactive queries and garbage collection and stale timeouts, like max age type stuff. There's a lot that goes into it. And yeah, that was the whole goal. Just make it kind of, I hate to use the word abstract, but abstract it all behind a simple hook. So,
and sometimes the way software is built, like you alluded to earlier, you just need a simple fetch. So just do that. And then the next 10 calls in the app are built with a simple fetch. And then you realize, we probably should handle this one condition better. And so 2 of the 10 now have a slightly better, robust implementation, but 8 of them don't. And then this keeps spiraling out of control until you've got one weird cache over here and another weird cache over here. And, it's all
true.
organic and not consistent at all. And I think if there's any difficulty with writing custom software, it's the custom software part of it. And the less custom you can be for utility stuff, and please don't take that in a bad way, but if I can handle all my data fetching, caching, and invalidation needs with a simple library like this, why would I roll my own?
Exactly. You nailed it.
So we did a question come in about, not that one, where I said about using React Query with GraphQL subscriptions.
That is another good question. So React Query doesn't have because it's agnostic to the data fetching layer, there's no first-class subscription support for GraphQL. I know people have written integrations for GraphQL subscriptions. Really what it comes down to is React Query has a very robust API. So we use something even at Nozzle where we receive WebSocket events from the backend. Anytime that any type of CRUD object changes that has to do with the user on the client, they'll get a WebSocket event that says this CRUD object changed. And we take that CRUD object, and sometimes you can just straight up replace the data in the query cache. So if you want, there is, let's see, optimistic updates or updates from mutation responses. It's the same exact thing. You can just say query client dot set query data. You pass it your key and you pass it your data, and you can just update it. And that's really no different than what's happening with the GraphQL subscription. Sure, the subscription's getting set up automatically by Apollo or whatever for the GraphQL query. But really all it's doing is it's listening for the data coming back and then just manually updating the cache. So we do that all the time in Nozzle. Anytime that we get a new event from the server, a CRUD object was just changed, we'll just take that new CRUD object and go update it. You can even take that to the next level because sometimes subscriptions are a little aggressive and you don't necessarily want to have to send the payload of the object over the wire all the time. So you can use invalidation instead. So if you just want to send an event that says something was updated, then you can just use the query client to invalidate those queries. And invalidation is a little smarter. If it's on the screen, it will go and refetch it. If it's not on the screen, it kind of just marks it as stale or invalid to go get it the next time that you show it. So there's more flexibility. It's a lower level API. And because we're not deeply integrated with GraphQL or any type of fetching client, we can't set up those subscriptions automatically for you. However, it's pretty simple to do.
It looks pretty straightforward.
See, you talked about not being coupled. I know one thing you had on the list was not being so coupled to React, right? And being able to use React Query outside of React. So is that something, like, as of the latest version, is React Query technically usable outside of a React context even?
Not out of the box. So there are two parts to React Query. There's the core, and then there are the React bindings. When you import use query, that hook is like a React hook designed for React. But under the hood, use query is importing from React Query, the React Query core. And the core consists of like base query classes and query observer classes, an infinite query class, right? So there's a lot of low level primitive React classes and objects that you can use to build such a client. If we were to go to React Query, the source, I can actually show you a little bit of what that looks like. If we go to source and we go to the React folder and look at index, you can see here's the stuff that has to do with React, right?
Can you blow that up a little bit?
Yep. So we've got use query here. And actually, let's go and look at use query. So use query is, we got all of our overloads, right? And then we're using base query. So let's move over to use base query. So here's all the React specific stuff. You can see there's refs, and we're tracking some, we're interacting with React rendering. So there's some things you got to do depending on your framework. Rendering is kind of different.
Yep. Suspense, it looks like.
Yeah, we're doing some suspense stuff here. At the end of the day, though, you can see we're using the core stuff. Here's a new observer that we create. There's going to be a new query in here somewhere. Actually, the observer creates the query. My bad. But this is the stuff that we're importing from the core. We're importing the notify manager and the query observer. Everything else, like those are the core things. If you were to go into this query observer file, you wouldn't find anything React related. It's all just sits here in this core. And all of this stuff right here, you can import and build your own client for whatever framework you want.
And has there been community interest in doing that sort of thing for?
Yeah, there has. I didn't want to kind of like own it myself because I don't really know a whole lot about Svelte. And I don't want anything to do with Angular. And I have no idea what to do for Vue. So I just kind of am letting things organically come to fruition. And there's been a couple of projects of people writing them. And I figure with time, winners are going to surface, to the top of the pot.
So is it fair to say that the strategies don't get in their way?
Yeah, I'm just kind of like, here's the core tools and here's the React Query repo of how we did it in React. You guys can try and mimic everything you're doing. they can import the core library. So I think it's kind of funny because if you were doing this in Vue, you would say import React query, but you would just use the core. It's all tree shaken, and it's funny that they would have to write that. But you're totally right. Just not get in the way and just give them the appropriate tools they need to build the client that they want.
Good, rebranded to query.
Yeah, I thought about it, but it's too set in now. It'd be really hard.
Remember, the other thing besides cache invalidation is naming things.
Yeah.
Here we are,
a good example of this, like this core, using this core logic is Zhoutai actually just released experimental support for there's a query atom that you can use now, and it uses React query under the hood. It's really cool.
What was it? I didn't recognize the name you gave.
So he also pronounced it amazingly, which I'd love to just congratulate him for that. So I was calling it Zhoutai.
Zhoutai. I don't know.
Sounds way more fancy.
Yeah, like a soft J, right?
Oh man, that logo is something.
Yeah, Zhoutai. So I think there's like a query. Yeah, so he has XState. He even has XState integration, but query is another one of them. So in here, there's you install React query, and then it's an atom with query. So you can create it's kind of like what's that library from Facebook?
It's a recoil.
It's like a recoil. I like it better than recoil, but it's like recoil, and you can create an atom, but it's like a query. So you pass the query key and the function. It just kind of works. It's awesome.
You gave me an idea. Sometime we should have a game show where we show clues. It's like, this is the GitHub, like the one sentence README description of the project, and see if you can guess its name.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Especially I think in the React world, everybody likes remix, recoil, redux.
Mm-hmm.
Gets in your brain, it gets screwy sometimes.
Everybody knows I like to just name things really boring what they are, right? But then just market the shiz out of it. It just create really strong branding around this.
Oh man, you should. We've had some fun. Dan and I can share some stories because we've worked on products. We had one called App Builder. Maybe you can take some guesses. There was debates between the name Icinium and App Builder. It actually was called by both at different times because some people liked the hip, very original name, and some people wanted to just straight up say what it does, sort of thing too.
Yeah, it's definitely a trade-off. I have things where I've named them very specific to very unique. I just think there's something about the React ecosystem where if you own React something on NPM, then there's just this natural affordance. It's too hard to pass up. I saw React query, the NPM, library name. I was like, yes, that is the one. So because it's easy, you just say, oh yeah, install React query, and everybody just kind of naturally knows, oh, he means React query from NPM. There you go.
I like it. What other experimental stuff do you have? What are you excited about React query?
Excited? Yeah. So selectors are cool. I guess I'm not really excited about selectors, but they are cool. People use them. It's pretty much what you would expect. This is that use queries hook that I talked about, where you can basically make multiple use query calls, but using a variable length array. So the length of this array can change over time.
So why would you want to do this?
So let's say you have an API where you can't request a list of posts. You have to request them each individually.
Okay.
Right? But you don't want to shove both posts into the same query result, into the same query cache. You want them to be cached separately. So
I could see that.
You could come in and say, you know what, we use query, and then you just do this a couple of times, right? Then people are always like, I want to do this, where you say, map. It's like items map.
And then
item,
React's going to yell at you for
and
this.
use query, and it's like, whoa, no, you can't do this.
Yeah, I think Danny Burnoff like shows up at your door.
Right. And so that's where you just have to build some internal tooling around it. It's pretty nice.
I could see that too, and it's not like I've worked with APIs like that before, and lots of times they're built that way logically. But I could totally see like you're showing a list of them. You can only get them one at a time.
Yeah, it was.
You don't want them. You want them to be cached separately, also because they kind of are their own individual entities.
Yeah. It was a unique situation actually with the AWS team. One of the teams at AWS. I think it was the team handling security keys or something. But they're like, we can't fetch security keys in bulk. Like
seems logical to me.
We can't fetch the individual. Like we can't say, give us all these keys. We have to try and call each one individually. And, but we can't put that inside of a component and split the component because then we need to know about all of them up front for a table. I was like, all right, you're talking about use queries. Let's build it.
Yeah, I can't imagine how being able to pull hundreds of security keys would go badly, but there's probably a way.
Exactly. You nailed it.
You mentioned selectors. I don't think I know what those are. Maybe you could just quickly for my benefit.
Super quick intro to a selector. So like this query is pulling a user object. So it's like fetch user. It's going to have a bunch of fields,
Yep.
User age, image, whatever, and username is one of them. So if you said if you were only interested in the username, you could say, okay, I just want to select username from the user.
I see. Yeah, it's like a shorthand to like drill down sort of thing. What
that does too, though, is it makes it so this component's only going to re-render when that data changes, not when the actual big like user object changes. So it's also a performance optimization.
Will it still cache the whole?
Mm-hmm. It still caches it based on the user. It's just in this instance of the query observer right here. It's just kind of boiling it down to data and only re-rendering the component when the username changes. So
gotcha.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. So you asked what I'm excited about.
I did. We've got one. I see. Real quick before we get into the excitement, we do have one question here. For use query for calling once, what do you think about using state time infinity? Bad practice or refetch?
Oh, I think he means stale time infinity. So
yeah.
Stale time infinity would basically mean you only fetch it once forever. So once it's fetched, it's cached, and you never try and refetch it from the server. I do that all the time for like we have things like column definitions that I guess I need to set do not disturb on.
Yeah, column definitions that will never ever change.
Yeah, there's column definitions from the server that are just dynamic, but they don't change enough to need to refetch them ever. It'd be like a list of supported languages or whatever, something like that. And that's kind of stuff where I'll say, stale time and cache time is infinity, right? Just like I just want to fetch it once and cache it and then use it everywhere in my app and never refetch it again. So that is a great use case for stale time infinity. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. What are you excited about? What's amazing in React Query? What's coming? All that good sort of stuff.
Well, if I'm being honest with myself, I'm actually more excited about some other things I'm working on, especially React Table. But that's like a whole different topic. What I'm excited about with React Query are these plugins. So there is this persist query client. It's experimental because we're still working on it. But basically, what this does is it lets you persist your cache, whatever's in your cache, to some location, and then bring it back up when your app mounts. This is really cool because what it does is it takes a persister. I think I spelled persister wrong. You know what? That's okay. Persister looks kind of cool. So it
somebody's
looking to get a pull request in. Here's your chance.
You're going to have to change a lot of persisters. But basically, you can use this persister interface. So this one's a local storage persister, which is right here. We can look at in a second. So you can create a new local storage persister and then pass it to this plugin with your query client. Missing a comma there. Great. And what it will do is it will constantly be keeping a copy of your whole cache in local storage. And then what happens is when you reload the page or when you come back, as long as the max age hasn't been hit, it just restores your cache from that persisted location immediately. Because some people are like, well, I'm using React Query, but every time I reload the page, I have to refetch the data. That's because React Query is like an in-memory cache. In fact, we could try it out right here. I'm just going to start up this. Wait, here we go. Let's see.
While you're getting that up and running, I totally Googled the spelling of this because I just had to know. And I'm now on english.stackexchange.com, and there's an entire thread about this.
Oh, geez. I knew that would be.
Yeah, this is way more information than I wanted, but the top voted answer says persister with an E means something that persists, whereas persistor with an O means something that provides persistence.
Oh man, so it could go either way.
Yeah, and like I read that and I'm like, I don't even know, like technically what you're building, I don't know. You need like an English major in here to decide what you should go with.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'll have to talk to some of my contributors and get extremely opinionated opinions.
Just write it up as a win. Maybe you invented a new term.
Maybe we'll change the name entirely. So here's just like your basic React Query application, right? Actually, let's come in here. I'm just going to slow this down artificially for a second. So we're going to await a new promise. And we're going to resolve it after like 2 seconds. So it will wait 2 seconds. It's kind of like we're fetching data, right? You reload the page, you got to refetch that data. This is the typical React Query experience.
I like that little hack for a sleep too, by the way. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is fun. And especially if your users are reloading the page a lot, which they shouldn't be, but I guess if they are, or if they're closing it and opening it a lot, it can be annoying to deal with this, right? So let's add in the persister now. So the only one that we have that's semi-official is this local storage persister. So I'm going to bring in this code right here. It takes the query client, which we have to pass in some of these options like the cache time. We have to set this to 24 hours because we don't want persisted caches lasting longer than a day usually. I want to be able to cache bust that stuff, right? There's actually cache busting options inside of the persist query client, which is pretty cool. So we'll pass it our persister, local storage persister, and I think that's all we should have to do. So if we come back, we already loaded this. Let's go into our application storage and just look at local storage here really quick. So yay, we got a ton of stuff in here, but one of them in here is the, let's see, React Query offline cache. So this is just the default key right here.
You crank that thing up too.
Yep.
Yeah, that is good enough to get the rough sense of it.
There's the default key. And look, it's huge. It's got all the data from the cache in it, right? But what's nice about this now is if we reload the page, you're not going to see that. You can't even tell I'm reloading the page, but I am.
Yeah, because it's getting it. Actually, do you have to worry about like hitting local storage limits with considering you're throwing like posts in there?
You do. So you'll, 5 megabyte limit, you'll get a little warning in a lot of browsers. It's like, hey, can this use more than 5 megabytes? You have to be like, the user has to be like, yes, it can. There's some browsers that don't even do that. They just kind of cap you. The other thing that you have to worry about is like spamming local storage for like trying to get and set things. It can be expensive to write to the local storage with really big objects.
So you have like a complex app and like you're persisting.
Yep.
Sounds like you kind of want to be a little bit, maybe not clinical, but at least strategic or careful with what you're doing with this.
There's actually so you can customize that local storage key, but you can customize the throttle time. So the throttle time is set to a second. It will only write to local storage at most every second right now by default. But you can say, like, if you're really spamming local storage and it's slowing things down, you could throttle that to 5 or 10 seconds to make sure that it's not happening that often.
And that would be non-blocking too, right? Like
hopefully. I'm not sure if writing to local storage is blocking or not.
Well, I think it is, but I'm pretty sure writing to local storage is blocking. That's why I'm wondering if like internally you defer
it definitely would be blocking. We would have to update the internals to like wait for an idle, for like an idle CPU time or something like that.
Yeah.
Or there's the option to just create a better persister. Like I know a couple of people who are currently working, we're just going to basically copy and paste local storage persister and make a session storage persister. Somebody's working on an index DB one. There's somebody who's already working on one for React Native that will work with React Native's basic like local storage, kind of local storage-y solution, right?
Yep.
So yeah, you can create a lot of them. And really the interface is really simple. If you look at what a persister is, this is what a persister is right here. Hey, how do you build your persister? It's just, an object that has these 3 methods right here. So
I love the Buster property. That's fun.
Yeah. That's really important. So that's really exciting. I think it's really easy. It's really easy to use. And I think just having something easy like that where you can just drop in and improve the experience from reload to reload is pretty neat. So let me show you the next one that I'm excited about. And then after that, we can take more questions and just talk about other stuff.
Yeah.
Broadcast query client. So again, I'm not sure about the name for this, but it's a utility for broadcasting and syncing the state of your query client between browser tabs or windows with the same origin. So if you have an application that has like a lot of, let's do this. Let's put another local host right here. If you have an application that's used across multiple windows, or users have a lot of different tabs, right? Then you'll notice that this doesn't really sync up with the cache over there. There's no, like we could use this one, but if we come over here, our cache is totally different and we have to hit those things again when we've technically fetched them already. So we come into our broadcast query client and you know what? We're going to do this with
We'll persist to local storage. We'll broadcast.
Yeah, so we're gonna broadcast the persisted query. So first we're going to do the local storage persister, and then we're gonna spin up the broadcaster.
By the way, I think broadcast is a good name because that's what I would think of for the like multi-tab communication.
Yep. And that's actually what a lot of the APIs are called. So let's see, cannot resolve experimental. Well, that is probably because we are out of date. Yarn upgrade React query.
Yeah, and this to me seems like, I don't know, like I imagine for certain apps, it is quite common to have for people to have like multiple tabs up. Like if you're in an app that's for power users, right? They might have multiple different instances up of the app at the same time. So I could see this. Probably not for everybody. Like it's probably for your average app, it's like a bit of overkill.
Right.
Yeah, I had the same thought, TJ, and I think kind of where I landed is the cost of using cached data. Like, it's really great for performance, but it can lead to
Hmm.
undesirable things. And so, if there's a way, there's got to be a way to prevent it.
Now it has me thinking that maybe we didn't release this yet. Let me go look really quick. No, it should be released.
Well, the show
You know
channel
what?
is called Code It Live, so we get
That's
it.
totally fine. What we're going to do here is we're going to go up a level.
Release it live.
We're
Go
going
next level.
We're going to link this, start it up. We're going to go back down into our examples, into our basic. We're going to link up React query locally.
Are you just pointing straight to the source?
Yeah. Why not, right?
Yeah.
Let's see if one of these works. I know I'm dancing around, probably making everybody sick. Let's see. And here we go. Come on. Something's already running on it. Why? Is something running on it? I don't think so.
You just pick another port just for fun.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay,
there you go. Loaded.
And I think, yeah, our local storage is still working, so that's good. So let's see if we click on one of these.
Yeah, there we go.
Hey,
So
look at there.
it's synced over. We'll click on this fourth one.
So then you should be able to go to the other browser and click the fourth one. It should be instantaneous.
It's funny. This browser hasn't re-rendered yet on the right, so it's not green. But as soon as I click the screen, it's going to re-render and it'll turn green.
Oh, wow. So because it knows that's loaded more or less.
Just this example is using just some green highlighting to show you like what's already been cached. So there you go. So yeah, it'll be instantaneous over here.
Yeah, can't you read old Latin, TJ? That's what Nesquik. Is.
I'm clearly I'm a linguistic. That's why I'm still looking at persister versus persistor.
Yeah, I wonder if we could just like take local storage. We'll just clear it. And then see, we wouldn't be able to we got to reload these windows both at the same time.
Oh yeah, because it wants to sync it.
Couldn't even get past it's kind of like that super cookie, you know? It's just like replicating itself everywhere. Right? So
once all your tabs are talking to each other, you can't stop them.
It's pretty sweet. I mean, we could do this. We could come in and just like remove these, I guess, manually.
And it's syncing right in front of our face.
Yeah, so you can see it only syncs when it's when the data comes in. So it's not going to sync loading states. You'll see this one is loading over here. As soon as it finishes, it syncs over. So it's pretty simple right now. It's kind of naive, which is totally fine. But
so it looked like from the documentation, you declare a channel, and anything that shares that channel gets the updates.
Yeah, there's a few options. Actually, no, it's just broadcast channel. So by default, it only works when you're on the same origin, right? That's how broadcast channels work internally. And we're using a ponyfill, like a polyfill, to go back and make sure that it works across other browsers. So it'll use like IndexedDB and local storage if it has to. But then it also has this broadcast channel string, which if you have multiple if you have multiple apps running on the same domain, or if you have if you're using multiple broadcast channels already in your application, you can customize which channel to broadcast and listen on. So probably unnecessary for most people, but you never know.
It's good to have. Actually, I think this comment kind of sums up things pretty well from Banu. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right, but he says just use query, use mutation, refresh query, and call myself a React query user. Time to get back to the documentation. It's true. I feel like every time I talk to you, I find 3 or 4 new things that I didn't know React query did. Yeah,
it's the full package. As a testament to how much it's changed. I think even the ecosystem. I never thought it would do this much, but it has. I get calls all the time and messages all the time from like big companies, Walmart. I mentioned AWS, Target, Apple. A lot of big players are using it, and then it's definitely prolific among just kind of people getting started with React. It simplifies so much. Many reasons that you had to learn use effect are just gone because you have React Query now, and especially useful for like small projects and startups where you don't have time to build this massive Redux architecture or have complete buy-in to Apollo or something like that. You just need to kind of get things working and make it feel like you have 10 people on your team when there's really only 2. So
I recommend it too. My wife is a longtime Angular developer, and she's been toying with React, and she's been asking me random React questions. So she asked me, she's like, well, I've been doing these calls and now I need like this. And I was like, I know the answer, right? React Query.
Yeah, it's true. So it's been really fun to work. It's been especially fun to work with the people who have been helping me build it as well. It started out really great, really strong, but it's become very polished and become so much better because of the people that have helped me build it. I should call some of their names out because they really contribute so much. Nick Bosch he's the man. He's not on Twitter. He's not, loud or anything like that in social sphere, but this guy's a baller. And he knows his stuff. And he has basically taught me a lot of what I know about TypeScript. Chernyavsky, he's done a lot of great work with it too. TK Dodo, he doesn't have a ton of contributions, but man, TK is like my hero every day. He basically takes care of the React Query Discord channel and triages like everything in issues and comments and everything. So talk about a fantastic community. There's an entire Discord dedicated to, I should just open up my Discord, but there's an entire Discord dedicated to the Tan Stack, and it's got a lot of fun stuff. So here's the React Query channel, just really fun. We got different sponsor, supporter levels for people who want to have more serious conversations. You can just ask questions. And you probably didn't notice, but I'll show you anyway. I even have a course on React Query that just called React Query Essentials that I basically walk you through and show you how to build applications with React Query.
Yeah, so you're sort of anticipating, because I was going to ask you like links and next steps and such. So I'm trying to drop some of these in the chat. So I dropped the link to the Tan Stack. And if you scroll down there, I found the link to the Discord is on that page. The link to your course is also on that same page as well, I think. Yeah, It is. So,
yep. Learn right here will take you there as well. Also a fun shout out, something I worked on recently is like giving sponsors a better home. So I got some fun sponsors. Some people even just use it for advertising because depending on what you sponsor, you get a bigger bubble. And I have a ton of perks too for sponsors where.
What'd you build the bubbles with? Is there a framework that builds the bubbles, or?
No, I use VisX actually. It's a bubble packing. It's the D3 bubble packing algo from it's put into VisX, and I use that. But then I didn't use SVG. I just used divs because I'm a barbarian.
I love that there's a D3 bubble pack algorithm. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's
cool stuff.
Brandon from Blitz.js is in there.
Yeah, Brandon's in there. Let's see.
It's almost like Dan's trying to drop like promos for our upcoming shows or something.
There's a lot of good people in here.
Well, there's that, but like,
Retool is fantastic.
Basically at the noon position almost, and he's got a great bow tie on, and like you just can't.
Yeah.
You can't stay incognito wearing a bow tie.
You can see there's Brandon right there. So if you didn't know, Blitz he's going to be talking about Blitz next time, right?
Yeah.
Well, Blitz uses React Query under the hood to power all the front end queries and synchronization. So
It's like Inception.
It is. It's awesome. So, yeah. Anyways, those are kind of my. I guess those are my shameless plugs. Come become a sponsor. You can get some pretty cool perks. I haven't had anybody do this one yet, but I hear that it's.
I've got a credit card somewhere. Let me just.
Actually, I did have somebody. I have a private sponsor who does this one. They're not allowed to show their name for legal reasons, but they wanted 10 licenses to React Query Essentials, and I was just like, oh, you should just become a sponsor. And they're like, oh, sweet. I really wish I could show their name, but I can't.
Would you say that the best place to get started is the course?
Yeah, the course is pretty great. Honestly, not that, I mean, obviously I want people to buy my course, right? But honestly, 70% of the course is in the docs, at least to some extent. So if you were just to go through all these guides and concepts and really study them, you would get a really good start going through the guides and concepts right here. So I would do that first. It really just depends on the style of learning that you like. If you just want to read, then just go through the guides and concepts. If you want to hear me explain things and talk through it and see me code from the ground up and use React Query to build stuff, then you probably would enjoy the course more. So,
I grew up in the non-YouTube era for technology, and so I learned how to code reading books. There used to be these things called books. I don't know if you remember those, but they're like books, massive things, and documentation. But it turns out I prefer it when someone walks me through it. Preferably, if I can watch them do it, I will learn much faster, and I'm much happier. And especially if I can, put the playback speed at like 1.5.
Yeah.
Some people talk like normal humans, and I need them to talk like this because I want to hear information really fast. But for me, if I'm going to pick up React Query, I'd much rather drop the dime on the course and kind of get going and be productive than chip around through the docs. Even though the docs are hilariously written, I really love the ethos and spirit through there.
I kind of wrote it like a story, like a book, but
it's nice. You did a very good job, Tanner.
I took inspiration too from like Egghead and a lot of the stuff that Kent does. Kent C. Dawes does for his courses, but like I pride myself in the fact that the course is only 3 hours long. Like I don't like to waste time. It takes a long time to record and edit stuff. So I made sure that it was like as succinct as possible.
I also there's a couple good one-liners in the docs that I found. Like I noticed your upgrade guide for V3, you start by saying previous versions of React Query were awesome, but like along with that, like some other things, and it's just like little things that breaks you out of like this. You used to documentation being like sterile, right? And it just brings some fun
I like
to
it to be entertaining, and I used to do a lot of I like creative writing too, and storytelling and stuff. So I try and write my documentation that's like, all right, I'm going to keep you on your toes here.
The internet thanks you for it, sir.
Oh, that's nice.
And speaking of nice, there's another question.
Oh yeah, we can get that. Is there a better way to cache data? Is there a way to cache data coming from querying a database?
Yeah, React Query.
React Query. Yeah.
You can fetch it however you want. Axios, fetch, gRPC. I don't care, but yeah, just fetch it however you want. Stick it in React Query, and you will be happy. Your users will thank you. That's another reason why I like React Query. Not only does it improve developer experience, which is usually the number one focus of libraries like this, but it also directly affects the user experience as well. Users, I've had comments from big companies. In fact, I think I can say this, but I think it was Walmart. No, maybe it wasn't Walmart. A company like them that told me they refactored everything to use React Query, and it's just so much faster. It just feels faster and better. Another good question. Somebody says, is it the same as SWR React? SWR and React Query are very similar. We actually released around the same time. SWR is a little more lightweight, both in size. So it's like half the size, but we're only talking like 4 kilobytes of difference here. But it's got a lot less features. It doesn't have anything near the API that React Query does for invalidation. It doesn't even have mutations. it doesn't do a lot of things that React Query does. So
cool. Well, Tanner, is there anything that we haven't mentioned? Any last plugs? This has been a lot of fun. Always great talking to you.
no, not really. What I'm working on right now is the next version of React Table, and it's a head scratcher. I'm writing it all in TypeScript, and
Oh boy.
it's
We'll
got
have
a
to
it's
drag
got
you
a
on the show
plugin
again.
system too, typed plugin systems. If maybe you've heard me tweeting about it a little bit, but man,
When you have this done, reach out. We'll have to have you on. I know we've talked before about we need to have like just a grid / table, just almost hang
I
out.
mean, if I'm lucky at the end of the day, Kendo UI is going to be using it under the hood. So
yeah, there we go.
you know,
I happen to know some people there.
Yeah.
oh really? No, I think we're good. It's been fun being on here. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Yeah. Well, cool. Dan, do you want to end with a plug of your own?
Yeah, let's plug the newsletter again, because that's how I found out about Tanner in the very, very first place. All of our developers submit the articles, and so they're developer approved.
And I'll plug one last time, the React Wednesdays homepage. Check it out. Upcoming episodes, like we mentioned. We got Brandon from Blitz next week. That'll be a fun time. I'm looking forward to seeing that demoed. React in Teams, Microsoft Teams after that. So that should be fun. But thanks one last time, Tanner. Thanks everybody for joining us. Again, we do this every week. So check it out. Until next week. See everybody.
Have a good one.
Bye.